Hi and welcome to another tutorial from Hans. Today we're looking at the Crash Pop text intro tutorial. So let's get into it. I've got my composition in front of me. We're going to press 7 on the numpad, hit Ctrl Alt and 0 to go to the camera mode, and we're going to delete this default cube. Then we're going to go ahead and navigate to our render panel, and we're going to change the color management view transform from AGX to standard. This will make sure that the colors are represented true to life, because we're going to need that. Next, we're going to go to the world and change this from this gray color here and change it to white, and that's represented by the hexadecimal code of 6Fs. Good. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a panel. So we're going to hit Shift and A, go to mesh and create panel, and we're going to scale this panel up such that it covers the entire camera. Cool. Next, we're going to go into the shader window and do some shading here. Press 0 on the numpad, and we're going to press new down at the bottom. Let's scale this up so that we can scale this window up so we can see what we're doing. It's going to give us principal BSDF and material output. We do not want the principal BSDF, so we're going to delete that. We're going to hit Shift and A, and we're going to add a series of nodes. The first node is camera data, and this is the primary control for the coordinates of the texture. Next is the mapping node. Good. And this is what we're going to use to manipulate those texture coordinates to give us the results that we want. Let's go ahead and add that node. Next is the main actor of this entire effect, which is the Voronoi Texture. I'm going to add here, put the vector into the vector here, and that is the first set of node networks done. So this controls the texture. Next, we're going to add some node networks for the light data, because we're going to have it controlled by light. That's diffuse BSDF, and we're going to convert that to something that we can understand, which is RGB. So we're going to say shader to RGB. Good. Enter in the nodes here. Now to add this data together, we're going to go ahead and search for a math node, and we don't want the grays from the Voronoi texture, we only want black and whites. So we're going to add the distance of the Voronoi texture data, and we're going to add the shader RGB to the threshold for greater than. Good. And with that, now what this tells us is that the distance mapping and coordinate data that's being produced by the Voronoi texture is going to be mixed with the light data that's coming from the RGB. Right, and we're going to enter that data into the factor of a color mix node. Good. And this is going to tell the color mix node how to arrange these colors based on the data that we provided it from these two, the light data from here and the coordinate data from here. Then we're going to enter in the result into the surface. Now we don't see anything here, and that's simply because we have the two colors are the same, so we have to separate the colors to see what is actually happening. Give it different colors. So we're going to go ahead and do that. In my example, I use two different shades of teal. We use a darker teal at the top and a lighter teal at the bottom. And already we can see it doing something here, but we're going to have to change some parameters so that we can get a better viewpoint of what's actually happening. Let's change this scale in our Voronoi texture from 5 to 15. Good. Let's add a bit of detail to this, make it 3. Let's change this to F2. Cool. In fact, let's just make this 2. Let's reduce the roughness a bit. And we see this here, and let's give it a bit more reduce the randomness, sorry. And we've got the effect that we're looking for here. So this, during my experimentation, I realized that when we animate the Z value of this, it looks like mini explosions that are going off. So basically we're just going to edit the scale of this to give off these mini explosions. Awesome. Now the only thing is that the explosion colors are inverted, so what we want for this to look a bit more logical as explosions, we're just going to go ahead and change this from mix to soft light, and we can see now that this looks a lot like clouds that are being exploded, right, which gives us the background effect. So when the light flare or the star flare explodes, we'll have the background react. So the only thing now is the light data. So if we change this from viewport shading to the render viewport, we see that we get a different result, and that's because the light is affecting it. So if we move the light GX, we can see that the clouds are responding, and this is good because when we add the star flash, right, it will react to the star. Let's go ahead and lift it on the Z so you can see what's happening, and we have our explosions here. So okay, let's move into our star flash. We're going to go ahead and create a plane. Let's scale this plane on the y-axis here, scale it on the x a bit. I'm going to go into edit mode, select these two nodes at the top. I'm going to press M on our keyboard to merge the two nodes together. That will give us a triangle shape. Let's scale this down a bit, and let's bring these two together. Good, and that gives us the basis for our flash star here. Then what I'm going to do here is press Shift and C to put the cursor to the center of the composition. I'm going to move my star about up here to the top of the cross here of the intersection here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and go to Object, set Origin to 3D Cursor. Then I'm going to hit Shift and D to duplicate and rotate, and that will rotate the triangles along the center here, and that will allow us to create our flash star. Then we're going to go ahead and select all of these together, and then hit Control and J to join them into one mesh group, or to one mesh rather. And then we're just going to go ahead and select these bottom edges here. I'm going to press X on my keyboard, and we're just going to delete the edges and faces. Cool. And then what we're going to do is just merge these together. Merge at the center for all of them. Press M, merge at center. Press M, merge at center. Merge at center. Good. Next we're going to create faces now. So this is important. We need to create faces here, or else we can't use our decimate modifier, and we're going to need to use that. So I'm going to create 4 faces here for our star. Cool. So we've basically got the formation of our star right here. So the next point is to add some shape keys. So we're going to go over to our data point here. I'm going to go to the shape key section. We're going to add a basis and two shape keys. The first shape key is going to be I'm just going to call it horizontal collapse, and for the second one here we're going to call this full collapse. Cool. And for the star, let's just name this, and we're going to call this flash star, just so that we know what we're doing here. Good. And let's go ahead and select the horizontal collapse and take a look at that. So first we want this to collapse on the horizontal. Let's bring it up here. GUI, bring it down here. Cool. And then for the full collapse, we want the entirety of the star to collapse. So bring this down here. GUI, bring this up here. And what we can do here is just use our snap tool to help us out here. So let's go to snap, select vertex, and then we're just going to snap all of these together. Cool. And this will represent the full collapse. So if we check the viewpoint, we can see we have a full collapse here, and we have the horizontal collapse. Cool. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to add some animation here. Okay, so for the animation of the star, it's a simple rotation that goes into a slowdown. Good. The slowdown implies that there's a slow-mo before an impact, kind of the calm before the storm. You see this in a lot of anime, you see this in a lot of cartoon shows that want to dedicate more emphasis on the impact frames of the explosion. So what they do is that they slow down the flash bang or the star bang or the star flash, right, which gives an indication of the powerfulness of the explosion. So the rotation of the star goes to this point, and we see a brief moment here where we get the star in its full state. Then as the star begins to start the rotation again, which is a clockwise rotation, we can see it's rotating again, it speeds up. The horizontal collapse happens simultaneously. You can see the star for the horizontal collapse. Good. And then we have the full collapse of the entire star, and the star disappears. So this is the animation of the star. Cool. And then we have the ring. So if we take a look at the ring scales in along with the star. It doesn't move while the star is having its slow-mo rotation, but as soon as the horizontal collapse begins to start, the ring begins to expand and scale, and it scales up beyond the camera. Good. Right through. And if we take a look at it here, you can see it scales on beyond the camera. And what we do here is that we use the depth in the curve options here. You can see bevel, depth. We use the keyframe of the depth to cause the ring to disappear as it scales off of the camera screen. Cool. And we know that these two also have an emission shade on it. I just want to show you. I have the strength set to 10 for both the star and the ring. Gives it this glowing effect. But you want to make sure that you have bloom enabled to see that happen. If you don't have bloom, you won't be able to see that. Cool. So with that, there's one more animation with this star, and that's the light. And we see the light moves up with the ring. So as the ring scales up, the light moves out. And what the light does is that it's telling our background here that it's basically interacting with our background. The shadow that we see cast here from the ring is cast by that light. So basically it makes it look like the light is interacting with the clouds below it, which makes it more real and also makes the whole design more cool, right? Because it looks like the clouds are being interacted with or being affected by the impact of the blast. And that's the end of the animation. I'll show you some animation graphs for you to follow for all the steps except for the depth and the light, because that light is just a simple Z transform. If you just select it here and go to Z, you can see it's just a simple Z translate that moves up, and the ring depth order is simply just a simple disappear. Nothing too fancy. That's just from 1 or whatever the depth is to 0 basically. Yeah, you can see it right here. Cool. And that's the animation of the star flash. So for the explosion, we've actually done this already. You can see the video to the left hand screen, and in this tutorial we go over in depth how we actually achieve this colorful explosion effect. So I'm not going to be covering it too in detail for this part. We're going to do an overview of what we've done here in this instance of it. So we have our explosions here. All of them have materials here that have their emission strength increased, so they have a kind of glowing effect that comes from the star flash. The kind of hot energy expands into the clouds and creates glowing clouds. So we have it glowing a bit here. When we reveal the rest of the scene, we will see that it glows amongst the other objects. And when we're doing the animation, we basically have it scale from the center point. We can see that all the circles are scaling from around the same point, and they scale outwards. And then we have a shape key here that causes the circles to collapse upon themselves. So what you want to do here is that you want to create a shape key here. Go to the bases and take a look at one of these. We can see this is the original circle. So all we've done essentially is with the curve selected, because I use curved circles for this, we've just moved this up and we've just collapsed the circle as best we can. Now even though we do the collapse like this and it comes out okay, sometimes, in fact more times than not, we're left with topology that's left over that can be seen by the viewer, and we don't want this. We want the circle to completely disappear. Here's an example of topology that's left. If we take a look at this, we can see we have a thin line here, and in order to get rid of this thin line, we're going to use the decimate modifier. So you're going to go to your modifiers tab and search for decimate. Now what this modifier does is, by reducing the polygon and face count, it collapses the object or the shape, right, such that there's no polygons left in it. And this is absolutely excellent for what we need here to get rid of this final topology. So what we can do here, and just hide this one so we can see it properly. We're just gonna, just before the collapse of the circle, we're just gonna add a keyframe here for the decimate. Add a 1 keyframe, and then when it's supposed to collapse and disappear, we just bring it down to 0, and we can see that the topology has indeed disappeared. Good, so it's no longer visible on the canvas, and this is how we get the disappearing effect, right? So if we take a look at the whole scene together, we can see that it keys in about right after the star flash, and these explosions are also staggered, right? So they don't explode at the same time, so you're going to have to animate it bit by bit. I'm just going to have to animate it along the timeline so they come at different intervals. It gives the explosion more impact or more variety, right? Makes it more interesting. And the A comes out about the same time the first explosion comes out as well. Cool. And that is the explosion part of this tutorial. Okay, we're moving on to the speed lines. So for the speed lines, you're going to have 2 different types of speed lines. You're going to have a broad one and you're going to have a thin one. Alright, so these essentially does 2 planes, and similar to what we did for the star flash, right, what we did here is just that we just selected the 2 nodes here and then merged it at the center and then stretch it out until we get the speed line. So let's take a look at the speed line first, the thin one, and then we'll take a look at the thick one here. So what we have here is this speed line here. Good. We've set the origin point to this cursor at the origin center of the canvas here, so that when we rotate it, it rotates across. You want to make it long so it covers the entire canvas. Yep, and then you're just going to duplicate it and add it at the separate points that you think that you want the speed lines to appear on. Then you're going to add a noise modifier. So you're going to navigate to your graph editor. You're going to set a X keyframe. Any keyframe at any position is good. Just make sure you have at least 1 keyframe, and then you can activate the noise modifier, where you can adjust the scale and such, right? And that's going to give it that speed look, like it's moving. And when all of them are together having that alteration, that oscillation, it gives it the appearance of the speed lines actually moving in time, and that will give you that effect. So that's for the thin speed line. For the thick one, or for the broad one, it's very similar, apart from we don't join at the top, we just bring it to the bring it so that it's slightly more together, more like a parallelogram type of thing. And then what we want to do is go to the data, create 2 shape keys, and we're going to create a shape key where the light emits from the source of the explosion. So essentially we're just carrying the shape up. You can use the snap tool here with vertex selected to bring the nodes up together so that they come together as one to produce this effect. And then once you have this, you're going to add a noise to this as well. And basically when the explosion goes off, right after this explosion, you're going to see this beam come out, and you're going to have several of these, and you're going to stagger them at different intervals, slightly off each other, so it looks like the explosion is happening at multiple areas of the screen, producing light at different paces. So basically you're going to put this around, rotate, duplicate it and rotate it just like you would do the rest of the speed line. Okay, so we're going to move on to the text part of this animation. I won't be doing this section here with Bang. I simply just created this in Inkscape and then applied the scale to it. So it's something that you can do for yourself, nothing too complicated. As for the text, if you see, it's exactly the same process as the Extrude text tutorial. I'm going to show you that on my left. If you follow that tutorial, you'll be able to create these lines just fine. All you do is that instead of moving it to one side left and right, you just scale it in, and that will scale in the letters to the center. Alright, so we're not going to go over the extrude part of that. Alright, as for the animation, this is a pendulum animation that has a sharp decay. Alright, so I'm going to be showing that animation in a graph. We start with the A, then you go to the R and S, and then you go to the H, which imitates the crash coming from the center. You're going to time the letters with the explosion. So the A comes out around at the end of the multiple explosions that we have here. We can see it here. It comes about the end. Good. And then the rest of the letters follow after with the same animation. Good. And we can also see that as it comes out, the A comes out, we see the first orange lines come out, and then as the R and S comes out, we see the red start to come out also, and that's also when the speed lines appear. So that gives you an understanding of the timing of this. You don't have to follow my timing, but I think this works okay. So if you want to follow that exact timing, you can use that. Cool. So the font I used here, right, so that's Bada Boom, which is basically the font name of an explosion. So it's very suited to the content that we have here. So that's badaboom.bb. That's a free font, free to use. So with that makes up the text part of this tutorial. Right, I'll show a graph with the animation on the screen so you can see how that's done. Yeah, and that's the end of it. But give it a thumbs up, and if you have better ways to do things, you can leave a suggestion in the comment section. I appreciate that, the community appreciates that. I was able to find tutorials when I was learning because people commented on videos, right? And I know that's an essential part of spreading the message and helping people to get better at Blender, right? And we need to get more advocacy for Blender because the motion graphic world is not as privy to what Blender is capable of when it comes to 2D motion graphics. So until I see you again with another tutorial, get up and design a new dawn. Later.